Mars, the god of war, opposing Pluto, god of the underworld, November 3rd, 2024. The atrocities of war, death, destruction, and more. Hello, my name is Eliane Nicole. I'm your astrologer and tarot reader, and in this video, I'm going to talk about this very intense alignment between Mars and Pluto that begins really building October 24th, but reaches exact perfection on November 3rd, 2 days before the American election. These planets are both malefics, and so the alignment does have foreboding implications for the collective and for some of us in our personal lives as well, depending on our own personal astrology. But before I go on with the interpretation, I just want to say if you're watching this on Instagram, I'm only going to post the first 5 minutes here. The entire video will be available on my YouTube channel, Eliane Nicole. My YouTube channel is my name, Eliane Nicole. If you're following me on YouTube, please make sure that you subscribe to my channel. Please hit the notification bell so you're notified every time I post a new video. Please like, please comment, please share. It all helps me in the algorithm. It helps me grow my community, helps me grow my business, and puts me in a position to continue to give these free astrological offerings. And if you are watching on Instagram, please make sure that you're following astrology.tarot.Eliane Nicole. Please like, please comment, please share. It all helps me in the algorithm, and it's free for you, and it's very helpful to me. And now, without further ado, I'm going to get into my interpretation of what happens when the god of war stands off with Hades. And on a collective level, this really does look like an impasse between two dictators or evil world leaders. This is happening in cardinal signs, Cancer and Capricorn, thus my interpretation that it's world leaders, and it's happening at the 29th degree of both Cancer and Capricorn, which is why I say it's evil world leaders at a standoff, because the 29th degree of any sign is always the most honorary degree of that sign because it's ruled by a malefic. And with Cancer, we're dealing with, on a collective level, we're dealing with nationalism, homeland security. We're dealing with bloodline, ancestors, homeland, and issues of privacy, safety, and security. And it is very emotional and very reactive. On the Capricorn end of things, we're dealing with systems, structures, patriarchy. We're dealing with governments, establishments, institutions, money, ambition, power, worldly materialism and worldly attachments. And so with the standoff of these energies, if you've been watching my astrology, you know that for a long time I've been making a prediction that this appears to be, from America's point of view, an attack on American soil from a foreign entity. A couple of days before the election. Now, this aspect, again, it begins its application October 24th. I'm recording this video October 19th. Different astrologers use different orbs. I've heard other astrologers say that this aspect is building at the full moon. There was definitely a very significant assassination of a very prominent leader of a regime that is involved in the kind of biggest war going on in the world right now. So it very much looks like this Mars-Pluto alignment can be an escalation of that moment. Retaliation, retribution, revenge, all of these things are characteristic of a Mars-Pluto alignment. You know, Mars is associated with violence, blood, police, warriors, soldiers. Pluto is death, rebirth, regeneration, underworld figures. And again, in the signs of Cancer and Capricorn, you're looking at the leaders, you're looking at the bosses. An opposition, you're looking at an impasse, you're looking at a standoff, you're looking at just complete oppositional views that are just, there's no movement. And so those two forces opposing each other often, it often manifests in violence, and it can be very different in our personal lives, you know. I'm initially talking about it from a mundane astrology perspective. Mundane astrology is the study of world events and historical events that affect the collective. Whereas if I do a one-on-one reading with a client, we're doing personal, like natal astrology and transits. And then we're talking about a person's life path and psychology and relationships and events within their life. And while the planets have similar meanings, they manifest differently in that context. For instance, if someone has a Mars-Pluto opposition in their natal chart, yes, a lot of times that's a person who has to overcome some kind of extreme adversity in their childhood. That is a part of the plot line of their life. But then as an adult, they can become someone who has very strong will and determination. This can be fierce competitors, you know, in athletics, like amazing athletes. It can be people who are very heroic and brave. It can be first responders. It can be people who are who just have like an impenetrable will and determination to succeed. You know, it can be people who have laser beam focus and power to reach their goal. You know, it can be so there can be very great manifestations of that aspect in a personal chart and in a personal life journey. At the same time, people can have that aspect in their chart and they go through things in childhood that lead them into a life of the underworld where they are, you know, thieves or rapists or murderers or gangsters or, you know, assassins, like things like that. And so there is a spectrum of how that can present. And when you're looking at a personal chart, you always have to take into consideration where all of the other planets are in the chart, what the houses are, what the degrees are, what the signs are. Astrology truly is a holistic art. And the same with mundane astrology, with a collective alignment like this one that I'm talking about. You know, because Mars is in Cancer and Pluto is in Capricorn, we're talking about a moon-ruled Mars and a Saturn-ruled Pluto at the time of this opposition on November 3rd, which brings me to the fact that this opposition will occur 2 more times over the next 6 months. So it doesn't stop here. Even though November 3rd is the first peak, we will see Mars and Pluto opposing each other 2 more times in the next 6 months. One at the very beginning of 2025 and again at the end of April 2025. So this is like a 6-month storyline that's unfolding, even though it starts here. That's why when I look at the election in America, it looks like we are going to be fighting over the results of this election within the country all of the way until April 2025. And if there is an attack from a foreign entity on American soil. As a result of this alignment, in the days leading up to November 3rd, or on November 3rd, or just the days following, again, these are cosmic waves. This is a storyline that we will be dealing with for the next 6 months. It doesn't just stop and start on November 3rd. It starts, it doesn't stop. But the first opposition, we're dealing with the anaretic degrees of Cancer and Capricorn. So that has a very specific flavor regarding homeland security and, patriarchy, dictators, worldly affairs and traditions and governments and systems and structures, the Capricorn stuff. That is the flavor of this current opposition, this first opposition that's kicking off the 6-month storyline. And I will talk more about the next two in later videos when we get closer to the time, but I'm trying to break this up into sections. And what's before us right now is the most important part, because it could affect the election. It definitely colors the tone of the election. There are some astrologers who believe the election won't happen on the 5th and it could be delayed, so maybe everybody should early vote. But even if the election does happen, the results will likely be contested, because you can see that there is fighting, there is an impasse. Now, in people's personal lives, this transit is going to be very personal to people who have any personal planets at the final degrees of any of the cardinal signs. So if you have any planets 27 to 29 degrees of Aries, Cancer, Libra, or Capricorn, this will play out in your personal life. But you have to take into consideration, if you want to know exactly how, you have to look at the chart, and you have to look at the houses that these planets are in and where it's happening to see the topics of life and how it's unfolding. You have to look at all of your other planets. You have to look at how your natal Mars and Pluto are positioned. Again, it's a holistic art. So if you do have any planets in the late degrees of the cardinal signs, contact me for a reading, and I can walk you through the specifics of how this is playing out and the timing of the storyline in your life, and how it's likely to evolve as the opposition comes back around at the beginning of the year on the Pluto Aquarius axis. But, yes, this can still be in a personal life. It can be violence, sure. It can be accidents, sure. Because we're dealing with Cancer, it can just be emotional outbursts. We're dealing with Mars in Cancer. It's family karma. It looks like things bubbling up that have been beneath the surface, rising to the top. It looks like, oppositional forces, standoffs, impasses. Again, they can be of a violent nature. With Pluto, we're talking about issues with domination and power and sometimes abuse. With Mars and Cancer, it can be, we can be looking at issues of domestic abuse. We can be looking at issues of violence towards mothers or families. We can be looking at issues of, robberies or home invasions or, this is deep, heavy stuff. It can, but, if it's in someone's first house, or it can be more psychological. It can be old family memories surfacing to be dealt with, and psychotherapy, haunting like memories from the past. There can be an air of like ruthlessness or domination, power struggles. Now, on the other hand, there is good that can come out of these alignments, whether it's for the collective or in our personal lives. In Pluto-Mars oppositions, this is where you see bravery and courage and heroes rising to the surface to save other people, to advocate for other people. This is first responders You know, these are people who run into the burning building to save a life. These are people who, you know, come with the aid to people who have undergone some terrible tragedy. And so you see both ends of the spectrum with an alignment like this. You know, you can see, you know, the best and the bravest and the most courageous and the most heroic acts of humanity in these types of situations as well. And so, you know, it's all kind of two sides of the same coin. But it definitely looks like escalation in the war on a collective level, and it definitely looks like events that are initiated by, you know, evil, greedy, power-hungry world leaders that are leading to, you know, death and destruction. And there could, I mean, it definitely looks like something that's going to greatly impact the American election. And again, it's a storyline that starts now and takes us all the way through until April. And, you know, if it's not an attack from a foreign entity on American soil, it could just be civil war within America that I'm picking up on. Astrologers are not psychics. We are reading a language. We are reading the language of the cosmos. You know, as above, so below. And it's a language of mathematical probabilities. There are no 100% certainties. As astrologers, oftentimes, if you listen to astrologers or have readings with different astrologers, you know, we are interpreting a language that we've all studied for many years, and so you're going to hear us say a lot of the same things. But there's going to be areas where we differ, just like when you go to a doctor, you get a different doctor's opinion sometimes, or when you go to a lawyer, there's different ways that they're going to approach a case sometimes, but they're still all coming from the same basis of knowledge. And astrology is no different, you know, and there's good astrologers and there's quacks, just like there's good doctors and there's quacks, or there's good lawyers and there's so mediocre lawyers, you know. I mean, it runs the gamut. I've been studying this stuff for almost my entire life, and you know, I know what this alignment has meant historically, you know, and for America, Pluto at the 29th degree of Capricorn is the end of our Pluto return. Pluto was in Capricorn when the founding forefathers signed the Declaration of Independence, July 4th, 1776. However, Pluto hadn't been discovered, so they didn't know it was there. It was in their blind spot. It's not in our blind spot anymore. As Americans, we are having to now deal with the last 248 years of atrocities within the country and from America onto other countries. But not only the past 248 years, the past 500 years, you know, because if you take it back beyond that, that's when the genocide of the Native Americans was going on, and the transatlantic slave trade. And so this is you know, Pluto takes 248 years to come around. So this is like once in, definitely the only time in our lifetimes that Pluto and Mars will be opposing each other at the 29th degree of Cancer and Capricorn. And it's kind of a once in every 3 or 4 lifetimes point in history that we are witnessing as people on the planet right now. So it's pretty major, it's pretty intense. And, you know, it's kind of Pluto at this 29th degree of Capricorn represents the end of an old world as we know it. And we're heading into this Pluto and Aquarius era that is an elementally very different era that begins November 19th. We've already had some foreshadowing and hints of where it's going, you know, with AI and robots and digital currency and, you know, frequency medicine. And, you know, more importantly than anything, I believe it's a revolution of consciousness. But I'm going to do a whole video on Pluto and Aquarius because it deserves its own video. But right now, this Mars-Pluto opposition at the final degree of Cancer and the final degree of Capricorn, it really is an escalation, an accelerated crumbling of the old world as we know it, and being brought to you by some of the most evil MFs who live on the planet right now. And I don't know. I'm going to leave it at that. You know, if you'd like to have a reading with me, definitely contact me for a reading. I would love to read for you. I read on Zoom, so I can read for people anywhere in the country, anywhere in the world. I will put the link to book a reading with me in the notes of the YouTube reading. And, you know, everybody just be safe during this time. You know, not a great time for taking risks. You know, make sure you're locking your doors and keeping your home safe and keeping your families safe. Not to scare anybody. Again, it's not going to affect everyone on a personal level, but I do believe that we will definitely all be reading about it in the headlines and on the world stage. And for those who have planets in the last degrees of any of the cardinal signs, it will be manifesting in your personal lives. And so if you're not sure about that, this is a great time to get a reading, get to know your chart, get to know the charts of your children and your loved ones. And, you know, but that's it for now. Stay tuned to my channel because I will be rolling out more readings about what's happening in the planets and what it reflects for us here on Earth. But for now, that is my reading. Safety first. Sending love and prayers to all.